I always book the cheapest Airbnb when I travel. Simple, clean, nothing fancy. This time, though, I didn't just save money. I nearly paid for it with my life. I've always relied on Airbnb for business trips. It's affordable, convenient, and usually hassle-free. For my last trip, a regional conference in a small town, I booked a listing on short notice. The price was unbeatable, and while the house looked basic in the photos, it checked all the boxes: clean, private, and close to the event venue. The reviews were sparse, just a handful of generic comments like "nice stay" and "quiet place." The host's profile wasn't much better. Their name was Sam, and their picture looked strangely generic, like something from a website template. I ignored the red flags and hit confirm, thinking I'd found another cheap, no-fuss stay. The house was more isolated than I expected, sitting at the end of a gravel road surrounded by overgrown bushes. It had a tired, weathered look, chipped paint, sagging porch steps, but for the price I'd paid, I wasn't expecting luxury. The key was in a lockbox by the door, just as the host had promised. Inside, the house smelled faintly of bleach, and the furniture seemed like it had been thrown together from thrift stores. None of it matched. I noticed the bedroom door had several locks, a bolt, a chain, and even a reinforced bar. It struck me as odd, but I shrugged it off, assuming the previous guest was overly cautious. I was only here for 2 nights. The first night was uneventful until I was halfway asleep. I heard faint noises, almost like shuffling footsteps, but it was easy to dismiss as the house settling. It wasn't my first time in an older rental, and I'd grown used to creaky floors and drafty walls. I turned over and forced myself back to sleep, trying to ignore the faint sound of movement. The next morning, I noticed my duffel bag wasn't where I left it. I had set it neatly on a chair, but now it was on the floor by the bed. I told myself I must have knocked it over when I got up during the night. With a shrug, I grabbed my things and got ready for the day. When I got back that evening, a few things caught my attention. The bathroom light, which I'd turned off that morning, was now on. The bedspread looked slightly rumpled, even though I'd left it neatly made. There was also a faint, unfamiliar smell in the air. Sharp, almost metallic. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself I was imagining things after a long day. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I decided to check the house, opening every closet and cabinet, even peeking under the bed. Everything was empty, just as it should be. It wasn't until I glanced at the bedroom door frame that I noticed tiny scratches near the lock, as if someone had been trying to force it open. That night, I locked myself in the bedroom, securing every bolt and chain on the door. It seemed excessive, but after noticing the scratches on the frame, I didn't want to take chances. I fell asleep eventually, the tension from earlier still lingering in the back of my mind. Around midnight, faint footsteps pulled me out of my sleep. They weren't random creaks, but slow, deliberate steps outside the door. The doorknob jiggled, followed by the unmistakable sound of a key scraping against the lock. My chest tightened as I grabbed my phone and texted the host, pleading for a response. When no reply came, I hovered over the call button for the police. Then, just as suddenly, the sound stopped. The silence didn't last long. A faint creak came from somewhere beyond the bedroom, followed by the slow groan of a door opening. My stomach churned as it became clear I wasn't alone in the house. I shoved the dresser against the door, hands trembling, hoping it would hold long enough. With no other option, I pried the bedroom window open and climbed out, ignoring the sting of broken glass. My belongings were abandoned inside, but none of that mattered. As I sprinted to my car, I risked a glance back. In the window of the house, a shadowy figure stood motionless, watching me leave. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest police station. I drove straight to the nearest police station, my hands gripping the wheels so tightly they ached. The officers took my statement and sent a team to investigate the Airbnb. A few days later, they called me back with unsettling news. Someone had been living in the crawl space, likely coming and going while I was out. Worse, the locks on the bedroom door weren't for protection. They were designed to keep people trapped inside. The host's profile, along with the listing, disappeared shortly after I filed the report. Sam had been using a fake identity all along. Saving money felt like a smart move at the time, but some deals come with risks that aren't worth the cost. I wanted to make memories with my 5-year-old daughter, Emily. After my divorce, I'd promised her more fun adventures, just the two of us. So I booked a small, cozy Airbnb in the countryside, perfect for a peaceful holiday. But by the second night, it became clear this trip would be unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. I'm 34, a freelance graphic designer who works remotely. After my divorce, life shifted focus entirely to Emily, my 5-year-old daughter. Ensuring her happiness and stability has been my priority. Between deadlines and the chaos of everyday life, I knew we needed a break, time to slow down and connect without distractions. This trip felt like the perfect way to give her that. The Airbnb I found was a cozy, secluded cottage surrounded by woods. It had everything we needed for a peaceful getaway: a small garden, a charming kitchen, and the promise of quiet nights. The nearest town was a short drive away, so we wouldn't feel completely isolated. 3 nights of games, baking, and exploring together sounded like exactly what Emily and I needed. The Airbnb was just as advertised, a bit older but cozy and inviting. The quietness was refreshing at first, with no neighbors or city noise, just bird song and the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. It felt like the perfect retreat, a place where Emily and I could enjoy the peace and focus on each other. Our first day was lovely. Emily and I explored the nearby trails, played board games, and baked cookies in the tiny kitchen. But that night, as I sat in the living room after putting Emily to bed, I began to hear faint noises outside. Branches snapping, footsteps crunching in the distance. It had to be animals, I thought. The next morning, Emily surprised me. "Mommy," she said calmly, "there was a man by the window last night." By the second evening, unease crept in. While tidying up outside, I noticed the back gate hanging open. I was certain I'd latched it earlier. In the damp soil near the garden, there were footprints. Large ones that couldn't have been mine or Emily's. I tried to rationalize it, but decided to be cautious. That night, I locked every door and window and checked them twice before putting Emily to bed. Sitting in the living room with my laptop, I tried to focus, but a faint scratching sound at the back door made me pause. My stomach tightened. Turning off the lights, I moved to the kitchen window and peeked out. The yard was still. Suddenly, Emily called out softly from her room, "Mommy, there's someone in the garden." I grabbed a flashlight and rushed to Emily's room. She stood by the window, pointing toward the dark edge of the garden. Following her gaze, I spotted the figure, a person standing near the tree line, motionless, staring at the house. My pulse quickened. I reached for my phone to call the police, but realized there was no signal. Staying in the house felt impossible. I knelt by Emily and whispered, "We're going to the car now, okay?" She nodded and held tightly to her stuffed bunny. Keys in hand, we slipped out the front door as quietly as possible, every step feeling agonizingly loud. Once in the car, I started the engine and glanced back. The figure was moving now, heading toward the house, fast. I drove straight to town, my hands gripping the wheel tightly, glancing at Emily in the rearview mirror to make sure she was okay. We didn't stop until we reached a gas station with bright lights and a handful of people milling about. I parked near the entrance, locked the doors, and called the police. Later, officers told me they found signs of forced entry at the cottage, scratch marks on the back door and a few tools abandoned near the garden. Whoever had been outside wasn't just watching. They'd been trying to get in. The host seemed shocked when informed, but couldn't explain anything. By the next day, their Airbnb listing was gone. I was just grateful Emily and I had left when we did. Emily still brings up that trip from time to time, though not in the way I'd hoped. What was meant to be a peaceful getaway turned into a lesson I wish we hadn't had to learn. She remembers the cookies we baked, the games we played, and the moment we left in the middle of the night. It's a mix of sweet and unsettling memories for both of us. Since then, I've changed how I approach travel. No matter how charming or peaceful a place looks online, I'm far more cautious now. I always choose well-reviewed hotels, stay in busier areas, and never ignore my instincts. That trip taught me to value safety above all else, because one moment of vigilance can mean the difference between an ordinary trip and something far worse. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Do you prefer staying in Airbnbs or hotels when you travel? And why? Have you ever had a scary or unsettling experience in an Airbnb? Share your stories in the comments. I'd love to read them. Don't forget to subscribe for more daily scary tales and turn on post notifications so you never miss an upload. Share this video with your friends and family to help keep them safe during their travels. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.